One of the new features of MVC 5 when it comes to views is support for enums. Basically, it allows the creation of drop-downs using enums and the editor for HTML helper method. This is actually a really great feature for developers who make heavy use of enums. Instead of having to do your own manual process to create those drop-downs, this latest feature in MVC 5 will actually handle all of that for you and create those drop-downs. All right, so now we're going to do a demo on using enums in your view. We're going to demonstrate the enum drop-down list for helper method. We're going to demonstrate the enum helper is valid for enum helper. And we're going to demonstrate the enum helper.getSelectList. For this demonstration of view enhancements, we're going to take a look at the brand new support for enums in views. To take a look at this, we first need to create a new MVC5 project. So we're going to go up here and click File, New, Project. And we're going to select the ASP.NET Web Application Project. We're going to leave the default name as is and click OK. We're then going to go up here and make sure we click on the MVC template, make sure that our core references for MVC is selected. We are going to change the authentication to no authentication. And we are not going to check unit tests, and we are not going to host this in the cloud. And now we'll click OK. As a best practice, we'll go ahead and rebuild our solution to make sure that our project has been set up correctly. We see that the rebuild was successful. Now we'll go ahead and run it. So as we can see, the website loads up perfectly fine, and Visual Studio successfully created our project. Now we're going to go in here and remove a little bit of the default content to kind of clear up the space a little bit to make it easier to work with. We're going to go into the index page, and we're going to remove all of this. And we're going to save that, and then we're going to come down into the shared layout, and we are going to remove all of this. We're also going to remove the body content style class, and then remove the footer information. And now we will save that. We'll come back to our index.html file, type in no content, then run it to ensure that our application still runs correctly. And it does. One last thing I like to do is to actually right-click on the project, set the properties for the web, and typically what will happen is when we're editing a partial view or whatever and we run our application, if this is set to current page, it will actually try to load our partial view. And we don't want it to do that. So I like to click on specific page, but I'll leave it blank so that the default home page for the website will load up. So we'll save that and we'll close that. Now, in order to work with enums in views, we first have to have an enum. So I like to come in here and I like to create a new folder called enums to store all of my enums in. So I'm going to create an enums folder, and then I'm going to create a new enum. Now from here I'm going to select class so that I'll get the namespace, syntax, and all of that set up for me automatically, but we're not actually creating a class, we're actually going to be creating an enum. And we're going to call this enum priority type. And I'm going to click add. And then we're actually going to take class here and we're going to remove that and replace it with enum. Now we're going to have three different priorities. We're going to have low, medium, and high. Pretty simple. The next thing we need in order to use enums and views is we actually need a model. So I'm going to create a new model here called task. Now we're not going to build out an entire task management system. We're just going to put in a few properties so that we can demonstrate how the enums work. So here we're going to put in a property called public string name get set, And then we're going to put in a public priority type. And for those who don't know, the way I get this drop-down box here is after I type in my type name, if you hold down Control and hit a period, you'll get this really cool drop-down box where you can select using Web Application 2 enums. And then it goes ahead and finds the type by adding that using statement to the top. Click space or type space, and then we'll type in priority, get set. And now we have a very, very, very simple model. So we're going to go back to our index page, and we are going to specify a model, make this a strongly typed view, and we are going to make this to be task. Once again, I'm going to hold down Control and dot, and I'm going to get my little drop down. Click on that. And so now I have the full namespace for my type. Now I'm going to come in here and do something very simple. We're not going to build the whole form for the name and all that. We're just going to do the actual enum itself. So I can start typing enum, and I'm going to see this new option show up down here called enum drop-down list 4. So I'm going to double-click on that, and then I'm going to type in my model dot, and then I'm going to select the priority property, and I'm going to save. Now, just to kind of make this look a little neater, we'll do a HTML label for model dot priority so we can get a nice little label for it too. And now we'll save that, and we will run it in Internet Explorer. Very good. Now you see we actually have a drop-down based upon the values of our enum. And of course we have priority in bold right next to it. So but it's a lot more flexible though than just this. We can actually go into our enum and we can actually change the display name. So I can come in here, I'm going to hold down Control and hit dot so I get my option to pick my data annotations namespace. Then I'm going to do name. And we're going to call this low priority. I can copy that. We'll change this one to medium. Change this one to high. And now I can run this in Internet Explorer. And now you can see in my drop-down I have low priority, medium priority, high priority. Let's take a quick second to look at the actual HTML that this particular helper generates for us. If we come in here, we're going to notice we see our select element, and inside of it we have our options with the first one being selected. And you can see here we have low priority, medium priority, and high priority. And simply all it does is it grabs the enum value. So in this case, it's just 0, 1, and 2. So that little helper allows you to easily create drop-downs for enums. However, as we all know, there's actually really two kinds of enums. There's the standard type of enum, like we're using here with priority type. But there's also another kind of enum that's a flag enum. So we're going to create another enum here called category type. And on top of it, we're actually going to give it the flags attribute. Now what this means is this will use a basically bitwise arithmetic to allow you to combine multiple enum values into a single value. And so we're actually going to create 3 different categories. We're going to have a category called red, and we're going to give it a value of 1. We're going to have a category called blue. We're going to give it a value of 2. And then a category of green and give it a value of 4. When setting up these bit flags, you have to give it these special values so that it's able to combine them together into a single value and then still allow you to extract out the individual values at a later date. Basically, what's going on here is that we're not really treating our enum as so much of a list of items and selecting one. It's really a combination of items. So let's save that, and now let's go back to our layout. Actually, let's go back to our task, and we're going to add a new property called category type, and we'll call it category, and we'll do get, and we'll do set. And now we're going to go back to our index page. And all we're simply going to do here is we're just going to remove our call to priority and replace it with one to category. And now we're going to see what happens when we run this. And you might be a little surprised at first, but it'll make sense once you understand it. So we're going to click Run. And we actually get an exception. The additional information actually gives us the actual reason for why it failed. Return type web application 2.enums.category type is not supported. Type must not have a flags attribute. So our enum drop-down list helper function only works with enums that are not of type flags. To further assist us in our programming, we actually have another helper method that allows us to determine whether or not an enum is compatible with this dropdown. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to change this from enum dropdown list to editor4. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to change this to model.priority, model.priority, and now I'm going to go over to our shared, and we're actually going to override the enum drop-down template. And I'm going to add a new view. Actually, I'm going to first create a folder called editor templates. I'm going to add a new view called enum, and it's going to be created as a partial view. I'm going to click Add. I'm going to go up here, type in my model, type enum. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to determine in our editor template here whether or not the enum being passed into the view is one that is compatible with the drop-down list or not. To do that, we do an if statement, and then we can do an enum helper. And in enum helper, there's actually a method called isValidForEnumHelper. And in there, we're actually going to pass in our model metadata. So we type in viewData.model metadata. Now, if our enum is valid for the enum helper, we're going to actually go ahead and call our enum helper here, model. Now this time, because the model is the enum itself, we just have to do our lambda function like this. However, if our enum is not valid for the drop-down list, then we're just going to do a simple text box. And do our lambda like this. Now, in reality, you'd probably want to do something a little different here, not just a simple text box for somebody to type data into, something that would be more appropriate for the type of enum data you're collecting. But for our purposes here, we just need a way to display it without throwing that exception. So with this, we can actually go back and look at our index, and this editor4, because this is of type enum, is actually going to map directly to our custom editor template over here. So we can now run this in Internet Explorer. And now you'll notice we didn't get the exception. This one displays the drop-down, and this one displays a text box where you can type in information that you want to store for that particular enum. The last thing that we want to demonstrate is how to actually use the select list functionality. You're not limited to just doing drop-downs. You can actually create your own special views based upon radio buttons or checkboxes, what have you. To do that, let's go over here and create a new template called, we're going to call this one enum radio list. And it's going to be created as a partial view. So we'll come in here and say model enum. Now once again, the first thing we have to do is we have to check to make sure that our enum is valid for this. So do view data, model metadata, put in our else, and we'll go ahead and throw in our HTML text box 4. So if our enum is a flag enum, it'll display the text box. And then we'll come up here. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a for each loop, var radio option in. We're going to use another enum helper method called getSelectList. And for this, we pass in our view data dot model metadata. Now here we actually put in input type radio. Value is going to be radio option dot value. And now here we're going to put radio option dot text. But there's one last thing that we have to do with radio buttons. As we all know, with radio buttons, you have a number of options to choose from, but only one can be selected at a time. In order to make sure that only one is selected within a radio option group, we actually have to give it a name. Now, for this name, what we're going to do is we're actually going to copy this. I'm going to paste this down here. We're going to put our little @ symbol in front. And then we're going to do property name. This is actually going to use the property name within this input radio element to tie all of the radio options together. And so now I'm going to come back to my index view, here we go. And I'm actually going to just take out the category for simplicity purposes. And now I'm going to specify my new template that I want to use. So I'm using the enum radio list template as opposed to the default enum template. And I can run this. And now we see we have a radio list. So I can come in here and I can click in my radio buttons. And that concludes our enum drop-down helper demonstration. One of the great things about ASP.NET MVC is the ability to apply attributes to our models. Now we can apply all kinds of attributes to our models. We can apply the display attribute, for example, to specify what the display caption or label will be for a particular field on a form. We also have the ability to specify different types of validation attributes, such as the field is required. Well, two of those attributes are minimum length and maximum length, to specify the minimum length of a string or the maximum length of a string. Well, a lot of times when we apply these validation attributes, we don't really want to validate it on the server. We want to validate it on the client in JavaScript. So making use of the unobtrusive JavaScript libraries with ASP.NET MVC 5.1, we can actually validate the min length and max length attributes on the client side without having to submit it to the web server to be validated. So now we're going to do a demonstration taking a look at min length and max length attributes. We're going to examine how they work, and then we're going to demonstrate how to use them in client-side validation with unobtrusive AJAX. For this demonstration of view enhancements, we're going to take a look at the new unobtrusive AJAX validation for min and max length attributes on model properties. So to get started with this, we're going to create a new project. And we're going to select the ASP.NET Web Application project type. We're going to leave the default name, and we're going to click OK. Now we're going to come up here and click on the MVC template, and we're going to make sure that the checkbox to the MVC references is checked. We're going to change the authentication to no authentication, and we're going to click OK. And we don't need any unit tests, and we're not going to be hosting this in the cloud. We'll click OK. Now Visual Studio has created our project here. We will quickly rebuild it to make sure that everything was set up correctly, and it was. And we'll just run it real quick in Internet Explorer. And everything loaded up as expected. Okay, so in order to demonstrate these min and max length attributes, the first thing that we need to do is we actually need to include the jQuery validate and unobtrusive libraries. If we look here in our scripts folder, we're going to see where we have jQuery validate and we have the jQuery validate unobtrusive. If we go up to the app start folder, we have this bundle config. And in the bundler, for those who don't know, the bundler is basically a really great way to combine various JavaScript, CSS files into a single download, which really speeds up the performance of your website. Well, if we look inside of the bundler, we're going to see where we have jQuery listed, but there's also this jQuery validate. And the filter for this is all of the scripts in the scripts folder that are jQuery.validate star, which would include our jQuery validate as well as our jQuery validate unobtrusive. Now, if we go to our layout file in views under shared, we're going to notice that at the bottom here we're including jQuery, but we're not including the jQuery validate bundle. So all we're going to do is at the bottom of this, we're going to add jQuery val. Now we'll be able to make use of the client-side validation capabilities of jQuery. So now, in order to test the min and max, we actually need to create a model. So we're going to create a new model called contact. And what we're going to be building here is basically a little contact form. And we're going to validate some of the properties on that contact form. So on our contact form, we're going to make this really, really simple. We're going to public string name get set, public string email get set, public string phone get set. Now on this, we're actually going to decorate this a little bit. We'll do a display. We'll do name equal to full name. We're just going to copy that and paste it. Change this to email address and mobile phone. We're also going to make this be a required field, and we're going to make this one be a required field. Now we're going to add in our max length. So we'll set the max length for our name to be 20 characters. Now, there's no reason why a name wouldn't ordinarily be longer than that, but for our demonstration purposes, we'll just make it have a max length of 20. And then for our email address, we'll make it have a min length of 5 characters. Okay, now we'll save that. Now we're going to come over to our view for the contact page. Let's minimize scripts. Under home, we're going to go to the contact page. Now underneath of here, we're going to build a very simple contact form. So the first thing we want is, since we're going to be doing validation, we want to have a validation summary at the top of our form. Now we're actually going to set up an actual HTML form using the helper methods in MVC5. Begin form. So we're going to put in our action, followed by our controller, followed by our form method, and this is going to be a post put in our little curly braces. Now we're going to do an HTML editor 4. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to make this a strongly typed view. We're going to set our model, contact, and we'll let it put in our namespace. And we are going to pass in our model. We'll also add a little bit of styling here. HTML attributes. And don't forget our comma right there. So now we have a form. This actually should say model. And beneath that, we're going to add a line break. And we'll just put a little button on here to do our submission. We use some of the nice little Bootstrap classes. And submit. The last thing we need to do is actually come over to our controller, and we're going to need to set this up so that we can actually receive that input. So we'll do public action result contact. We're going to actually put our contact class in there, and we are going to pull in our model. And we're not actually going to save any of this information. We'll just return the view. And now we're also going to limit this to post. And so now we can actually receive our information. So now we can run this. We'll come to our contact page. We see that we have a full name, email address, and phone. And so I can type in my name, type in my email address, type in my phone. And what we're going to do is, since we're not actually saving any information, we'll actually just set a little breakpoint right there. And so if I submit this, we'll see that my contact object has my email, name, and phone. Now you'll notice I've satisfied all the conditions. My required fields have values, my name does not exceed the maximum length, and my email is longer than the minimum length. So we'll just continue this, and we'll go back to our form. Now we're going to break one of the rules. So I'm going to basically take my name, going to copy it, I'll just paste it again, and paste it again, and now I've exceeded the 20 characters. So if I click here and do submit, I'm going to get the field full name must be a string or array type with a maximum length of 20 characters. Now you'll notice we didn't hit our breakpoint here because we never made a call back to the server. In this case, the validation actually happened on the client side in jQuery using the jQuery validate and the unobtrusive libraries. It was able to do that because back in our model, we had specified that our maximum length would be 20. So now if we go back to our form and we just shrink that down to, let's say, 1 character and click submit, now the field email address must be a string or array type with a minimum length of 5. So as you can see, by using these validation attributes directly on our model properties, combined with the jQuery validate and unobtrusive libraries, we're able to easily do client-side validation, validating the minimum and maximum length of a string.